students have clashed with the police at the Mangosuthu University of Technology, Umlazi. Students used burning tyres and debris to block the institution's main entrance. It's understood their protest is part of the national shutdown of higher learning institutions campaign. The students are protesting against financial exclusion and the scrapping of historical debt, among other issues. Our reporter Desan Tathia and ETV reporter Nabila Sheikh are following the story, and they join us now live. I want to start with you, Desan. I hope you have managed to find yourself some safe space to be able to speak to us. Just tell us what's happening at the moment.
Well, Morena, outside the university, it's a very different picture to what we saw when we arrived here early this morning. You will recall at that time a lot of what was going on had spilled onto the streets of Umlazi and had basically come from the students had come outside the university here onto this main road. And now, fortunately, some of this has been cleared, as you'll see. The intersections have been reopened. I see outside that the police have also just arrived with a water tanker now. This wasn't here earlier. I think that they have actually brought in reinforcements, because we also did see an armoured vehicle from the Metro Police arriving. Things really did escalate earlier. You've seen that during our live coverage when students had been playing a game of cat and mouse with police. Right now, police are on standby outside, because I think one of their priorities at this point is to ensure that the students don't spill back out onto the street and start disrupting traffic. Although this road still remains closed, they are trying to contain them over there where you see now, and that's at the gate. That's also the space that they were using as their refuge earlier, because they would come out and attack police and then go back in and hide behind that gate. Things had stabilized a little while ago. It had quietened down. The students were on the far end of the campus, but they've since regrouped. They have gotten bigger in number as well. Not all of them that you can see in front of you. Some of the students are still on the campus property, and they've now moved forward again while police remain on standby. As I mentioned, the only different element now is that the police have brought in some reinforcements, and they are doing everything to ensure that that is where the protest remains, and that is where the university will hopefully have an opportunity to engage with these students, because it has now developed into what is an untenable situation.
Nabila, I want to come to you now. Can you just give us a picture of the damage that has been done either in or around the university, the premises?
Yes, well, if we take a closer look at the entrance of the university, we see that some of the students are bringing out mattresses from their residences. We do not know what they plan on doing with this, but some of the appliances were actually set alight from some of the student residences earlier today. We also see on the ground there's quite a lot of books that are scattered and burnt around the main entrance. In terms of the damage that has been caused to the physical property as yet, the Vice-Chancellor and the management haven't given us an update as to what exactly has transpired on the inside of the campus and the amount of damage that has been caused so far. But we know for now the main entrance is completely blocked.
Yes, and you had a chat with...
We now see police actually...
Yes, we can actually see water cannon now just firing some water into the crowd that's at the entrance there, as Nabila was telling us.
That's correct.
Yeah, the water tanker has now moved into position. As I mentioned, they had called in reinforcements. It is now spraying those students that have gathered outside the gate. But despite that first blast that they've just fired now, the students are not retreating. They've moved slightly beyond the gate, but yet they are still remaining in position where they are. Now it is once again a standoff. There's that second blast of water that you're seeing now. And students seem unfazed by what's happening now. They don't seem to be retreating at all. We're standing right next to that tanker. And now they are starting to move inside. It doesn't seem to be having that desired effect of dispersing this crowd, because they did want to move these students inside, as I was saying to you at the start of this crossing. The water tanker is now moving closer, and it's finally making those students now gather inside the university property.
Ditson, I remember you mentioning a little earlier on in conversation with our colleague Gareth Edwards that the idea was to get the students off the premises and not actually push them deeper inside.
That's right. So that was the initial plan. But then the police were faced with this other challenge of if they allow them back onto the street, which they've just cleaned up with the help of the Durban Solid Waste Unit, there's going to be more chaos out here. So ultimately, what now needs to happen, as you're watching these visuals of the police using their water cannon to disperse this crowd, is that the university needs to diffuse this situation to ensure that when the students do emerge, they're not going to come out as that group or gang that they were a little while ago targeting police. There needs to be a discussion that's held, their demands need to be discussed, because otherwise this is going to continue for the better part of the day and indeed for the rest of the week, because right now the university says it's in a position where it's not sure what it is that this group wants. So for clarity, Morena, this group is not the official structure of the SRC, according to Dr. Manyane Makua, who I spoke to earlier. He's the acting chancellor. He says that this is a splinter group, which is making it very difficult to negotiate with them, because a discussion has already been held with the SRC, and to that end there's been some kind of resolution. Something very unusual happening here. While the police water cannon is firing its stream into the university, you've got students behind it cheering. I hope you can see that beyond these makeshift shields that they put at the front. They've got a mattress and what looks to be a base set there. But the water cannon seems to be moving closer, and obviously the students are then retreating further into the campus, which comes back to what you were saying. Ideally, that's not going to solve the problem, having them there for as long as their issues are still exist.
Nabila, I just want to come back to you as well. Do we know if any arrests have been made? Because obviously this has been going on for at least the better part of the morning. Has anybody been arrested from the group of students who have been rioting?
Yes, well, this morning when we had arrived here, we actually saw 2 students that were being put into a police vehicle. But we are yet to get an update from police, because these protests did start quite early today, about the total number of students that have been arrested here so far.
Desmond, can we hear what it is they're chanting? Because I know earlier on you also did say that one of the chants that were coming out was Senzeni na. So has that really just been sort of the chants that have been coming out?
Well, no, just at that point that they had settled down and they were seated. And it's at a point where the police had thought that they were, in fact, calmer. That was at the point that they had sat down and were singing Senzeni na. Now it's been a host of different chants. That's been the case from the morning. They are also re-energized, if I could put it that way, because they now seem more determined than ever to make their point known. I wonder, though, if they will be taking the university up on its offer to engage. That's what came out of my interview earlier with the DVC, Dr. Makuya. He said that he is willing to talk to representatives because, in his words, he doesn't imagine this is what they want to be doing for the rest of the day. There has to be a greater purpose. But outside here, from my vantage point now, Morena, police are on standby. We're standing next to them, and the water tanker is here to make sure that they are not going anywhere and certainly not coming back onto the roads. But the concern is that it doesn't seem to be keeping them at bay, nor does it seem to be dispersing them. This is not the first intervention by police. Earlier on this morning, they had also used stun grenades, and they did fire rubber bullets as well in an effort to disperse them. But clearly, that didn't work.
Have we seen a growth in numbers of the protesters that are there? Because I know there was a figure that you'd given of about 30 or so. Has the number grown?
I'd say it has, because what happened, interestingly enough, earlier was that core group that you saw was about 30 or 40 strong. When they had gone in and sat down, that's when a different group had gathered from the left, and they had initially been standing around on their own. They came forward, they were singing, and they joined that main group that was standing behind this gate and throwing rocks at police. And the numbers that you are seeing now, even beyond what you're seeing on your camera, because remember, there are some people that are a little further on into the campus, that is now the number of students that have gathered. And I think I must also be careful about using this term students too loosely, because another thing that came out of the conversation with the DVC is that he said that some of the people in this group, while some are legitimately students, others had not even officially registered at the university yet.
Of course, that is our reporter, Desan Tathia, and he's, of course, in the company of our ETV News reporter, Nabila Sheikh. And, of course, we also do have just that bite of David Makua, the MUT acting vice-chancellor, who's going to be standing by, of course, so we can just hear from him as well. That is, of course, in conversation that he had with Desan Tathia a little earlier on, confirming, among other things, that some of the people that are there are not actually students who are protesting. Instead, it is people who are just there to incite a lot of violence.
Yesterday, management had a meeting with the students, and we discussed extensively their demands, and we committed to deal with those. What is happening now is outside the discussions that we had with the students, because earlier this morning I approached the very same group of students, and I discovered that the SRC was not part of this, because we had engaged with the SRC yesterday. And this is a group that is on the side, which I don't know yet what it is that they are protesting about.
So, if I understand you correctly, DVC, this is the almost a rogue group, because you're saying that this group didn't form part of that engagement that you've had?
Yes, no, it didn't form part of the engagement. The first question I asked when I approached them this morning was, where is the SRC? And I gave a call to the SG of the SRC, who assured me that they are not part of this, and that they are still waiting for management to respond to the issues that we discussed with them yesterday.
So for clarity, the issues that you did discuss with the official structure of the SRC, and I'm just going to ask you to turn slightly so we can keep an eye on what's going on to the left of us as well. Okay. So if I could just ask you to stand here, yes.
Okay.
Let's just clarify the official issues of the SRC as they have put forward to the university. Can you confirm those for us over and above the issue around historical debt?
Well, students have several issues.
The police are just asking us to move to the left, so if you could just join me.
Students raised legitimate issues with management about their registration, about them accessing results, even though some of them are still owing. They raised issues about laptops and data, and wanted management's commitment that once the academic program starts, they will be able to access those. And at most, in the meeting that I stayed in, we have made some commitments to the students and assured them that the issues that they are raising will be addressed.
Of course, that is the acting vice-chancellor of the Mangosuthu University of Technology, who was in conversation with Desan Tathia a little earlier on. Nabila, I just want to now come back to you as well. Do we know of the condition of the staff? Because when we were in the building or in the premises a little earlier on, we could see some of the staff that were just hiding in the admin block. Do we now know, do we have any idea of where they are, how they're doing? Nabila, I'm not sure if you are still there and if you can hear me, but I was just asking if we know what the status of the staff at the MUT premises is. I think Nabila is just unable to hear us now. Desan, I don't know if you managed to catch that question. Of course, you yourself with our colleague Neil were just giving us visuals of the staff that were there at the admin block. Do we know if they've managed to come out or if they've still stayed in the admin block?
Well, no, some of them are still within that admin block, Morena, so they are now considered to be safe, because at that time the police had allowed them to take refuge in that block. Not all of the staff are here. as you know. But I want to point something out to you. There was a sign that was being held up earlier. It's now lying next to the gate, just to the left of where these protesters are. And what it says is, away with arrogant management. I think probably one of the first and clearest messages indicating what it is that the group could potentially want. And this goes beyond the demands of the SRC. You remember that the SRC was fighting about historical debts. They were fighting about free registration. They wanted students to register for free, but they also wanted other items like laptops to allow them to study. The university, as you know, has said that they are trying to sort out those issues. But now it seems like this group, the splinter group, doesn't want this management team at all if their sign is anything to go by.
Does the SRC share the same sentiment as this group that is protesting now, that they too don't want management there?
Well, that's certainly something that we need to find out, because the university is saying one thing, they are saying no. The SRC doesn't actually share that view, because the acting vice-chancellor is basing that on the meeting that he held with the official structure of the SRC. He says that this group is basically, these are rogue elements that are going against those negotiations that they're having. But it certainly is a conversation that we still need to have and need to pursue with the SRC at this institution. As you know, we have had our hands full for the better part of this morning, because there have been these battles between police and students. One of them is now exercising, it would seem, Morena. Yeah. Perhaps an indication that they are getting ready to continue with this battle that they've embarked on.
And I know when you, with the police, were inside the premises there by the gate, of course, there seems to have been a bit of a quick meeting between the officers about perhaps what it is they were going to do. Do we perhaps have any kind of idea, besides them calling on reinforcement and backup, what it is they're actually going to do? Are they prepared to stay there the entire day as well?
Well, they haven't discussed their operational plan with us, and that's understandable, because they too have been quite busy with ensuring peace here, and more than that, many of them are not actually allowed to speak. But what I did see for myself was the fact that they had brought in reinforcements. The police contingent had grown since what we saw here in the morning when we arrived. It actually seemed at that time that there was a very small group, and then as things escalated throughout the morning, they had then called in other members of the SAPS as well as the Metro Police, and then brought in their armoured vehicles. The latest of those interventions, as you saw for yourself, was this water tanker that water cannon rather, that they used, but that didn't really have the effect that I think they would have expected that it would have had, because the students are still here. And as I say that, there seems to be some movement once again, and now police are moving in once again. We're going to follow them as they make their way inside. They may have read my mind, Morena, or at least heard what I said about the water tanker or water cannon not having the desired effect. They've now decided to come in by force and remove some of these obstacles that have been left here at the gate. And as they did that, the students then scattered. They've gone back to where they were probably about an hour ago, and that's about 50 meters or so within the campus. So what I see now is that police are just clearing this entrance way, and they once again resume their positions here at the entrance. It would look as though they could see the risk of the students spilling out, and possibly a repeat of what had happened this morning, and they can't afford to have that happen, because they had only just cleared the road in anticipation of reopening it to the public.
Do we know if they're going to perhaps scatter around as they tried to do a little earlier on and find any lingering culprits around that they can arrest, or are they just going to keep a hold there by the gate as we see them doing now?
Morena, let's watch this quite closely, because what I see now is that one of the armored vehicles just outside here seems to be entering the property. The water cannon is moving out of the way. And what you're seeing now is the SAP's armored vehicle making its way into the property. Up until this point, they haven't brought any of their vehicles this close. The first of those was that water cannon. It's now standing by there. To the other end, students have gathered in the distance. It is essentially a repeat of what we saw just over an hour ago. Some of them, just while you're looking at the activity outside, I can just see that some of them are actually flinging or tossing rocks up and down, not necessarily throwing them at police just yet, but appearing to be in readiness to engage if the need does arise, and I use the word need loosely.
I don't know if we can see properly there in the picture, Desmond, but are we seeing any kind of a formation by the protesters in the back, or are they too just essentially making sure that they keep their distance from the police at the moment?
No, they certainly look a lot more tense than they did earlier, and at that point it looked like they posed no threat when they had been singing and they sat down in that very spot. But right now, all it looks like is they've just taken a step back, almost regrouping themselves while police do the same thing on this side. So right now, they are just separated by this wide open space between the main gate as well as where the university property begins. And it's what they had done earlier, starting there and then moving all the way up to where we are standing now at the gate. And I'm not clear as to why the police had eventually decided to move back out into the street and across the road without leaving any of their officers here, because that was what allowed them to get out of the university property in that formation in the first place a little while ago.
And I mean, it's obviously safe to say, Desmond, that there's been absolutely no learning, there's been no working from, the administration in the building. Nothing orderly has been able to happen because of these protests that have been happening for the better part of the day now.
No, not at all. So while the Deputy Vice-Chancellor would say to us that, the university is not closed per se, but certainly it's only open by virtue of its gate being open and some of the staff being here. But there's been huge disruption in terms of both the registration process as well as getting any academic program going as well, because of what they are seeing now. There is a lot of unrest, and it wouldn't be safe for both the staff as well as other students that may not be involved in the protest to actually resume with normal activities as though nothing were to happen. In fact, now, just behind our cameraman Neil, I see that they are starting to move forward, and they're once again coming towards where the police are standing, albeit just a lot slower than they had earlier. You see, the difficulty here is that because they haven't put forward a representative yet, it's difficult to ascertain, for one, if that entire group that you see, I just heard a rock fly past us, struck the gate behind me, but it's difficult to ascertain if all of them are singing from the same hymn sheet, so to speak, because there are a number of different formations within the splinter groups. It all gets quite confusing if you think about it. And just as I had mentioned in my conversation with Gareth earlier, you can't say with any certainty that because they are wearing a particular political party T-shirt that is, or those are the interests that they are representing, because there are mixed political shirts within that group, if I could put it that way, different banners that we are seeing. And in fact, even the student that was arrested earlier, and that, according to a police officer that I had spoken to briefly earlier on, had said that it was just the one student at that time. That student was also wearing an IFP T-shirt, but again, no guarantee that they have any affiliation to the IFP student body, for example.
So we're seeing them, of course, move a little closer to where the police were. Can we just maybe then try and get a picture of where the police are standing and if they're preparing to perhaps engage if necessary?
Yeah, let me show you that now. So what you're seeing is the students advancing, and this is within the campus property. So I'm just trying to give you an idea of where we are located. What you're seeing now is the main gate, and you'll see that a barrier has been formed much closer than where we were earlier. And that was standing at the actual intersection just to the right of the armored vehicle. So police, as much as they've moved in, are not necessarily on the campus, but rather just standing by at the gate to the institution. The students have moved about halfway to cover this distance that had originally separated them and the police. And although they're moving very slowly, I can see that they are inching forward and coming back to their original position at this main gate.
Dessen, do we know if university management has asked the police to keep their guard there at the gate, at the premises? And if perhaps that is the case, why then are they not going in to the university, like right in there, and they're only stopping at the gate?
Well, I did see the acting vice-chancellor here engaging with police earlier. He was talking to some of the senior officers, but I wasn't privy to that conversation itself. So they're just asking us to step away now, because I see that the police have taken more of a definitive position now. Some of our colleagues are just saying to us that they've been asked to step aside. We just want to get off to the side of the police, or perhaps behind them, because we wouldn't want to disrupt their planned operations now. So the gate has been shut once again, as you see, and we've returned to where we've started now.
So obviously that just sends a picture, Dessen, that they're not going to be going back and keeping guard at the gates. I would imagine that this is probably an order that they've been given.
Well, it would seem so, yeah. So it seems like now they've actually come off the property. You know that in the past there have been issues around police officers actually, they've been met with a lot of resistance when they've entered the university properties and tried to disperse these crowds. It's happened many times in the past, and they are in a very sensitive position now, because although earlier they were trying to use all of the resources that they had at their disposal for crowd control like this, it just wasn't enough, because this group did not want to retreat. You saw earlier on those pictures that the water cannon was firing water directly at them, and all they did was to take a few steps back and come forward again. So that's why, even in the discussion with Dr. Makuya, I was saying to him that all of this is not really going to achieve anything, because even if today ends and the police manage to stop this protest from moving any further today, what about tomorrow? It's not a situation that they can allow to continue every single day of the week. And it's certainly not a situation where police can be deployed here in these large numbers and with these vehicles every single day. Something more certainly has to be done, Morena. And it was something that the university had said they are going to work on, because they too agree that this group now needs to come to the table. And that is what needs to happen next.
Dessen, the higher learning education crisis is something that's been happening for a number of years now. Do we know if this is something that is new to MUT? Have they gone on strikes of this nature before?
No, certainly not new to MUT. In fact, there have been a number of such strikes here. I just see the water cannon is also just moving into position again, so I'm just going to monitor that. But to answer your question, Morena, no. It's something that has become commonplace at MUT, especially over the past few years. We've seen it even as recently as last year and the year before, where they had similar protests. In fact, that one I remember quite distinctly was a lot more difficult for the police to manage, because they were on the property, and students, I feel, had a bit of an advantage at that time. They were even running through some of the venues, through the buildings and out again, and many of them managed to cause absolute chaos on the university. And then if you go beyond MUT, it's also, as you know very well, not something that is new to the university structure in the province as well. We've seen the recent protests at DUT as well. There was that huge debacle over the registration process there. So that's why, to go back to what you had asked me originally about where the police are going to be staying here indefinitely, they'll stay here as long as they are needed to, but